Welcome to Franchise Killer, a podcast where we talk about movie franchises or wannabe franchises, review them film by film, and see where things went wrong. All right.
You're a panting dog now?
No, that was okay. It was the most annoying noise in the whole movie for me was when John Lithgow was just hyperventilating for what felt like 20 minutes, and it was just, dude.
But at least we got to learn what chicken is in Russian. At the very least.
Dude, controlled breathing. Exercise controlled breathing.
Wait, could you say what chicken is in Russian?
Nakhtvazja.
Nakhtvazja.
For all of you out there, I just made up a word that sounded slightly Russian.
Okay, vodka. The movie, of course, we're talking about is 2010. Sometimes it's just called 2010. Other times it's 2010, the year we make contact. Just like the first one, where sometimes you just see it as 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, if you're trying to look it up, just type in 2010 Space Odyssey and you'll get the right result.
Yeah, exactly. Or just type in 2010. I'm sure you'll only get the one result of the movie.
I first typed in 2010 Odyssey and it came up with a Honda.
Yeah. 2010, the year we make contact. A movie that I feel like has really been swept under the rug. And I guess this episode is here to determine if it's worthy of being pulled out from the under the rug and polished off and put on the shelf next to 2001.
Honestly, I think it's living in the shadow of 2001. And considering this came out 20 years later, that's saying a lot.
I'd say it like a moon orbits around.
Yeah. Space. Keep it space related, guys.
2001. Yeah, it's not like quite. It's not on the planet, but it's like around it.
I just want to know the thought process. Like, you have this monumental classic, and sure, it had been a few. It hadn't, aged like a fine wine as much as it has today, but it was still regarded as, this is a Kubrick movie. It's impeccably made, and yet they're like, let's make a sequel. Like,
it's one guy said, let's make a sequel.
Arthur
it's
C. Clarke.
obviously a cash grab. I mean, you had all this like hype about the Mayan prophecy or whatever, calendar ending. So
2012?
Everything at the time was, just kind of that was so annoying.
That's one of my favorite things to do is try to, like, on the spot think really quickly what movie AJ watched instead of the correct movie.
We watched 2010. AJ looked a little further into the future. 2012 popped in Roland Emmerich's classic 2012
a classic Mayan movie.
That movie is so dumb. But do
you guys remember
I'm just
that?
Kidding. I know better. I mean, they had the iconic images of the very large array of those satellite dishes. So,
yep.
Yeah, Carl Sagan's Contact.
Oh gosh, you just going with another one. Come on, Matthew McConaughey in Contact.
Yeah.
Anyway, I haven't announced us yet. I'm Reese. Across from me we have
David.
To his left,
Irina.
To my right,
HAL 9000.
also
Again.
known as
Noah.
You have to be a slightly different one because he was more muted in this one.
You could be
Sal.
Dave.
You can be Sal 9000.
I'm HAL 9000. I changed my voice a little bit.
know.
How's that?
I don't like
disagree.
that one.
And
I'm HAL.
Does
Sal.
that stand for sexy?
and disobeying the Star Child's orders and traveling directly to Europa, we have
AJ.
How's it over there? It looked kind of foresty and not particularly inviting.
Yeah, well, everything ends up as a swamp, so...
Looked like the Dagobah, honestly. Like, I was half expecting like
getting Star
Yoda
Wars,
and
too.
Luke Skywalker to go running through. But yeah, again, the movie 2010, the year we make contact, movie that came out in 1984. It's directed by Peter Hyams, who also directed Capricorn 1, Outland, Running Scared, Time Cop, Sudden Death, The Relic, and End of Days. The movie stars...
Relic.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
Good?
It was good.
Oh,
I liked it. Fun.
Movie stars Roy Scheider, John Lithgow, Helen Mirren, Bob Balaban, Keira Dullea, and Douglas Rain. It's kind of weird. We have actually some of the main
cast.
surviving cast members from the first one kind of making returns, and then we have these three kind of, they weren't A-listers at the time, or I don't even know if Roy Scheider was ever an A-lister, but he's still like
He is in my mind.
I mean, he was in one of the biggest blockbusters of all time, Jaws. So maybe that qualifies. But yeah, it's weird seeing a sequel to 2001 with like movie stars actually delivering like movie star type dialogue. Although this one, it only seems mainstream when compared, or at least it seems to want to be mainstream compared to the 2001. But if this were released in isolation, I think it'd be compared more to something like Ridley Scott's Alien.
Yeah.
Or like that's the vibe it's going for. I'm not saying it's nearly as successful, but you've got this crew here and they're just kind of, going about their business. I'm getting too far into it. The movie is written by Peter Hyams, and it's based on 2010 Odyssey 2 by Arthur C. Clarke. Anybody do any research on that book or see what anything about? Sorry, I cannot speak right now. Does anyone know what happened in that book?
Yeah, so Clarke didn't really plan on writing a sequel because obviously if you didn't know and didn't listen to the last podcast, Kubrick and Clarke basically created the story for the movie, and that was that. So really the creation of the second book was just kind of, prompted by, milking it and trying to get more money versus a planned story. So, yeah.
It's kind of weird because I got the sense in our last episode that Kubrick and Clarke kind of were like-minded and were treating this material with a certain level of respect. And Kubrick is someone he is not a cash grab type person. Sure, his movies have a huge following, but he's never going to he would never do a sequel to a movie.
Well,
I couldn't
the
imagine
fact that
him
he
ever doing
destroyed all the props from the first movie, I think, is a perfect indicator that he's like, nope, we're not turning back.
But apparently, like, he gave this director his blessing to do the sequel and was supportive of him. So it's like very mixed messaging on that.
Clarke didn't choose, from what I understand, Clarke didn't choose to do it because of money. It was more of the publishing or whoever owns the rights or all that, however the back ends of the money stuff work. He kind of was pressured to write it, from what I understand. But yeah, the book was written eventually, and then, people wanted to make a second movie, obviously, because of money. And we have the director here who actually was hesitant because, like we said, how do you follow up Kubrick? So he actually called Stanley Kubrick and eventually got his blessing on doing it.
Interesting. Is anyone familiar with the book and how, I guess, accurate this is to it? I guess we can get into that in the story portion.
Well, I'm not going to get into it, but the little research I did, this said that this movie was more on par with the book than 2001 was.
Yeah, I did read that Peter Hyams was in close, email was just starting to be a thing, and they were like corresponding over this movie. Just decisions that were being made.
There was email in the early 1980s.
That's what if IMDb is lying is telling the truth, which it very well could be lying. Because you could go on to IMDb and put in a fact if you wanted. But yeah, that's what I read. So, email. All right. Anyway, for those that are new to this show, on this podcast, we first go over our thoughts on the film before revisiting it for the episode. Then we dive into the story, break it down bit by bit, and talk about the more significant moments. Then towards the end of the show, we give our brief reviews and numbered scores, along with an analysis on the health of the franchise and whether or not this film hurt it. So you guys, had y'all seen 2010, or 2010, the year we make contact? Before this episode, AJ, had you seen it?
Nope, I had not. And honestly, really didn't know that there was a sequel to the 2001 A Space Odyssey until just kind of researching things. So, yeah.
I remember, and sorry to go before y'all, I remember figuring out there was a sequel to this movie. I worked in retail, and I remember we had a bargain bin of Blu-rays. And I remember going through that bargain bin, seeing 2010 with the Star Child cover on the front and being like, is this like a misprint or something? And then to pick it up and figure out that 2001 had a sequel by seeing it in the bargain bin that's the first time I've ever discovered like a big classic movie had a sequel. David, how about you?
No, hadn't heard of it. I feel like I saw the cover just somewhere at some point, but again, just hadn't seen. I hadn't even seen 2001, so this whole franchise was out of my realm.
Noah.
Well, I was in it. You saw the baby, right?
True.
You're like
That
you're
was
like the
me.
baby from Nirvana who grew up.
Yeah.
Look how far the
Bigger
Star Child
penis,
has
though.
come.
Pointing out Chads in various film franchises.
Like I thought Star Child was meant to like end war and bring peace, but no.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So I take it no,
Big
you
shoes.
had not seen this movie.
No, I was too young.
Too young. Okay. As in not existing.
Maybe.
Okay. Irina.
Nope. I was wondering if maybe something would click for me as I was watching it. None of it was familiar. Other than, the references from 2001. I know I've heard this title before, but I didn't care enough to really ask or investigate any further. I kind of just assumed every now and then that someone was, not saying 2001 properly and just went like, oh yeah, they're the same movie, whatever. So kind of like you, I didn't know there was actually a legitimate sequel to 2001. So I was surprised.
All right. So we are all new kids on the block when it comes to this film. All completely fresh viewings. Yeah, again, I had not seen this. I know I said that I saw the Blu-ray on sale, but that didn't mean that I picked up the Blu-ray, bought it, and watched it. So,
Well, I think the fact that the first time you heard about it, you found it in a bargain bin probably doesn't lend to like a great desire to watch it.
Yet it was $5 on Amazon, and I read that like it's not as bad as you think. So I pulled the trigger on the purchase there, and now I have a copy of it.
I'm just imagining a review on the back of it. Not as bad as you think.
Like kind of like a shrugging emoji. It's like, huh.
Like, all right.
2 stars.
It's a movie with a runtime. There's characters who do and say things.
You gotta milk the
wonderful.
stars as much as possible, honestly. I don't know how big John Lithgow was before this, but
I don't
you
think
saying
any
you're
of
gonna
them
milk John Lithgow?
maybe that's why he was going.
All right.
Wow. All right. With that said, let's get into that story. AJ. Oh, wait. With that said, David, give us that quick call to action.
Welcome to Franchise Killer Podcast. If you want to make sure that I do not push the button to release nuclear warhead and destroy all of you, you must make sure to go onto Apple Podcast, give our podcast 5-star review, leave a comment, like us, go on Instagram. I don't care. Just don't make me push that button.
That's perfect. I liked it. Love the
Pretty
energy.
good.
That felt like a pent up call to action. Like you've been longing to
been
do this for
itching.
the past like 2.5, 3 weeks.
I mean, I've never gotten to do
That's
a Russian
probably the
accent up to this
psoriasis.
point.
I know, never. It's never happened.
Yeah, he just wakes up feverish in the middle of the night saying, subscribe!
Subscribe! I almost did an Arnold voice. That's not, I had to stop myself.
Oh,
Ooh,
man.
when are we gonna do an Arnold franchise?
Hopefully soon.
Ooh.
All right. With that said, AJ, you want to take it away with that story?
If this date is correct, then there's something down there.
It is correct. It was organic. There was life.
Is it moving?
Yes.
It's incredible. Listen for a minute. We've got to get out of here.
I can't just order us to leave here for no reason.
Forget reason. There's no time to be reasonable. Can't find him!
Are you sure you are making the right decision? I think we should stop.
You see, something's going to happen. What? Something wonderful.
9 years after the loss of Discovery 1, a retired Heywood Floyd is sought by Russian astronomer Dmitry Moisevich. It comes to light that the Russian vessel, the Leonov, will be ready for a follow-up mission a year earlier than the U.S.'s own Discovery 2, which will be too late to reach the original ship before it crashes into Jupiter. Floyd and fellow American scientists, Discovery designer Walter Kurnow, and HAL 9000's creator Dr. Chandra, joins the Soviet mission. As the crew explores Europa, a sudden burst of energy is fired from the moon towards Jupiter, which destroys mission-critical equipment of the Leonov. The Soviets feel this is a freak accident, but Floyd suspects it is a warning.
All right. Question. I think any vacuum there... that wouldn't be a question.
It wouldn't.
It would be a statement.
I think.
Do we like that this is tonally different from the first movie and that it approaches this story in almost the opposite way that the first one did? The first one was very ambiguous, very like, hey, you know what? I'm not giving you the answer. You think on it, and whatever you come to, that's cool. That could be it. This one is like, during the first one, they did not do narration for a reason. And this one immediately narrating the story. Yeah. Like there's a narration voice. It was a conscious decision to do that in both of these films. Like one is this way, this other one's going to be opposite. Yeah. And do we kind of like that it distinguishes itself from the first in that way, or should it have kind of tried to ape the same style?
No, absolutely not. I think that they did the best choice they could because, I mean, if you're going to do a sequel at all, and I think one of the big things is that because they destroyed all of the replicas, Kubrick did, you can't really rebuild the set. You kind of have to approach this from a completely different angle. And do you want to try to do
but they did rebuild some of that stuff.
No, well, some of it, but not really. Like they never did anything to scale or model the way they did in the first movie. They did like some sets, like the memory card set and stuff like that. That's cool.
I would say that it feels right for it to not be as much of a concept movie, I guess. Or by that I mean, I don't know.
By that he means, do you want to try to recreate Kubrick?
No, it's not. It's not even that. It just feels like the first one sets it up in such a way that any movie after it doesn't have to be like the first one. Like it could have an actual story.
I most equate this to Alien and Aliens. The first movie directed by Ridley Scott, second one directed by James Cameron. These two movies are totally different from 2001 and 2010. But Alien 1 is a very slow burn horror movie that finally hits like a breaking point at the end, and then it kind of but it never like becomes an action movie. Aliens is a straight up action movie, completely tonally different. Not even like, yeah, it has horror elements, but it's almost more of like an action movie, and it completely just a 180 from what the first Alien was. I think this 2010 reminds me of kind of what that first Alien was doing, where it is you have this crew of people just going about their business, and they're on a mission, and stuff starts to happen. And there's kind of like, but the one thing I was missing is the first movie had it was so intriguing. Like I wanted to know what the mystery was.
Yeah.
This tries to rehash that and set up its own new thing where it's like, but it almost felt like it was trying to do the exact same thing, just not nearly as effectively. Because in the first one, there was the first crew that made it out to this dig site and then died. And then the mission is the Discovery going to this dig site to check out the monolith, and then stuff happens again. And then this one is like, all right, well, let's send another one and do the same thing over again.
We'll keep doing it until we get it right.
Yeah.
So, I think the change up in style is kind of a double-edged sword for me, in that it's a good idea for it to kind of make it seem fresh and continue what story they can.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it also doesn't really feel like it's a sequel. It kind of feels separated from the original, and this is kind of like a fan fiction wishing this was what happened after.
Yeah.
It really does.
And that sounds really bad
No.
comparing anything to fan fiction, but that's just it doesn't feel like canon, I guess.
That's the thing with fan fiction, though. It's like it could be really, really good, or it could be really not that great. And
Yeah.
I do think you're hitting on some of the energy where it's like a return of your favorite characters or the ones that were more interesting. And I know in the first film we talked about how we wished we could have seen more of Hal and Bowman, you know, kind of like that back and forth.
He gets his little redemption arc.
We don't get it in the way we want it, but there is that mentality where I think the people working on this film knew, like, oh, we need to see more of Hal, we need to see a little more of Bowman, and like how this would play out afterwards.
Yeah, I can't remember if this was in this part of the story, but regarding Hal, I almost didn't like that he got a redemption because I liked the ambiguous nature of his end in the first one. Like, was he totally bad?
What
Was
I'm
he
saying,
good?
Noah,
Yeah.
this is like literally, this movie is so opposite of everything the first movie is trying to do. It's very explain, resolve this, answer these questions. Like it's like,
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No.
I was just going to say, yes, it resolves those questions, but then tries to include some other thing you need to be concerned about, which is basically this issue between the Russians and the Americans. So where 2001 kind of brought you out to I'm sorry, I'm like losing my voice. Brought you out to a mind, like gave you basically a mind frame of thinking about humanity as a whole. This movie kind of takes you back to humanity in this small sequence of time where like this is what they're concerned about in this moment, in these like this decade we're
Cold War, baby.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's really a challenge, and you could argue that this sequel shouldn't have been made because the first was made in such a way that it precluded any kind of sequel. Like just stylistically, it's so abstract and self-contained. It's like eating, lemony tuna fish and then trying to eat, chocolate or something after that. Just like, it's not a good idea.
It doesn't follow.
They're two very different things. And so having a traditional story to try to follow up something that's kind of so highbrow, high level, abstract that just it's I don't know. You're asking for a challenge, really. So I think I guess of the two choices you have, it's better to, I guess, just kind of return to normalcy with a regular story than try to do another abstract second movie after an already very abstract artistic movie.
Yep.
That would just be really unnecessary.
And regarding the first third of this story, or however much of the plot we got through, I am actually I found it encouraging, or I was kind of optimistic about it because I like the cast. If you're going to have stars in a movie of this nature, pick like the more unconventional ones, like Roy Scheider in this. Helen Mirren, even at the time, I don't even know if she was. I think this was her first American movie, if I read that correctly. So a lot of these, and John Lithgow too. None of them were big at the time, and they're not like your number one go to. Like, hey, this is your a leading man. Yeah. So I think that's a smart choice for this movie, and I think Roy Scheider really does add a lot to this movie, and just having him at the forefront it made it more of an appealing and inviting prospect, like watching a sequel to such a classic, where I'm like, okay, at least I'm kind of in good hands with these actors.
I agree.
He's one of those actors that always has a lot of feeling in his eyes. Like, he knows how to use his mannerisms in a certain way that makes him just almost immediately likable, at least for me. And that's how I felt about Jaws. And I think he's part of the reason I see Jaws as a comfort film. Like, not just did I grow up with it, but there's something about him that I just really, really like.
Yeah.
He's our anchor.
Yeah.
And it was a smart choice, too, because you think about the first movie, and all of the cast in that were so good at making you just believe that they were just people working on a ship.
Yeah.
Like, this was their day-to-day. And Roy Scheider is, you think about him in Jaws, and in this, and he does seem like a man who's just, he's working.
He's thrust into this.
Yeah, so from a casting standpoint, I'm like, very on board with this. And I do like, and I'm very intrigued by the beginning of this, like, what we're going to go and check out what happened with David Bowman and check out what happened with Discovery 1 and all that. That sounds very fascinating. And I like the whole introduction of the Russian-American conflict into this, how that is, it's on Earth, there are problems while they're out there, and it's escalating down there, and that ends up, playing a part in this. Like,
it's given you a good premise. Like, you're like, okay, I'm invested. I feel like this is actually a good plot line. I could see how this would become interesting, and I do want to see what happens next.
Yeah. I definitely think the movie stagnates after that, though, and I'll just leave it at that. Where did we leave at in the story?
We have a lot more to go.
Yeah, they got to Europa, and it gives that blast and kind of startles them. So...
Yeah, so...
I'm going to pick up...
How many story portions do we have?
2 more.
2 more? Okay.
Do you want to just continue with the story, go into the meat of this?
Okay. The crew shakily navigate closer to Jupiter and acquire contact with Discovery 1 and the Stargate monolith. The Soviets risk exploration of the monolith, which leads to the loss of cosmonaut Max. The Americans force entry into the Discovery 1 and tentatively reboot HAL. At the same time on Earth, international conflicts escalate to war, forcing segregation of the crews to their respective ships and independent return trips to Earth. An ephemeral series of messages and visions from Dave Bowman appear, warning of an imminent event. The crews are warned to leave Jovian airspace within 2 days, a feat impossible with the sanctions on them.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, so for this movie, I was actually able to kind of separate from 2001 because I think it's different enough from it that you don't feel like you need to connect.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think this movie stands on its own if you're not trying to make all of the 2001 connections and everything. I actually think it's an interesting plot development to have, the Russians and the US kind of on the same team, and then they're told, like, hey, by the way, y'all aren't on the same team anymore. And I think that's a cool concept for a Space Odyssey type thing.
Unfortunately,
if it's not 2001.
It doesn't really go anywhere from there. I think there's a lot in this movie that's trying to inject tension, but I don't ever feel the tension because they're kind of trying to juggle 2 plot lines at the same time.
Yeah.
And neither of them really hit home for me.
Yeah,
they're both half-baked, but you're right. They're like, it had 2 ideas, and one was to kind of, hey, remember the first movie? And that's the plot for that one, kind of just redone. Yeah. It almost seemed like a rehash of the same plot in a weird way. And then it also has the Russian conflict, as you said. And they're both just kind of underbaked. What were you going to say, AJ?
The one of them that did draw me a little bit more to the edge of my seat was the reboot or resuscitation of HAL.
Yeah.
Where that is like, okay, so how's this going to go? They're exploring the themes of, I guess, AI, conscience, consciousness, and treating it as a sentient being, or, is it going to have a psychotic break or malfunction again? I wish they delved into that, and that's actually kind of, I think if the first movie was less abstract and as recent, I expected it to be more of this cat and mouse between the murderous Hal and kind of thing as the more majority of the story, then this would have followed more naturally. So again, I think this was kind of handcuffed by what was presented before it, while also trying to not just make it a rehash by adding in those political, social, cultural intrigue kind of things. And this is where it picked up for me a little bit with Hal's reemergence and Dr. Chandra and him kind of being the defender of it. I just think they could have dug a little bit more, and it might have met halfway the high concept stuff from the first one a little bit more.
This movie's just in such an unfortunate position where it's like it is having to follow up a stone cold classic. And you can't help but compare it to that one, and it knows that, so it's throwing these little things at you.
Yeah.
Like, hey, remember Hal? We're going to bring Hal back. And then it knows that moment has to be there, and it has to be, like, when Hal first speaks again. That's supposed to be one of these moments where it's like, oh, Hal's back, and the crowd goes wild, like, when they hear it the first time.
Pretty big.
It is, but it's...
It's not only a classic, though. It's a weird classic. It's
Yeah,
a crazy, off the wall, like what the hell is going on classic.
No, you're totally right. It's just something
that's hard to follow.
And AJ's right. It is handcuffed to that first movie, while and it doesn't do enough different and interesting. It's.
But at the same time, we have, I would say, really good cinematography, really good acting. It's not bad.
Well, no, here's what it is. It's grabbing the 2001 clout so that they can, either get funding or make some money or whatever, and making kind of their own idea. Really?
And what David said just now actually kind of spoke, like something that I thought about while watching this movie again was like looking in the background and the sets and the cinematography, and that was what pushed me the most positively for 2001, despite kind of being a slower, not so entertaining movie, was the production side of things. And I can look into this, and I didn't look into as much research as I did for 2001, nearly as much for this one. But I'm looking at sets and stuff, and I can definitely see an effort where they're like, okay, we've got this, big shoes to fill. We have to make sure all this stuff looks great. And I think they actually, some of the slowness is because they're trying to show you everything that they did, but it drags it out. Whereas something like, say, Blade Runner, there's so much amazing set design that just is there as accents and doesn't even get shown on scene, but all of that creates this subconscious authenticity. And I think the direction here didn't get that you put all this effort into creating authenticity doesn't necessarily mean you have to show every single nook and cranny of it for the set design and all the technical side of things that a lot of sci-fis have. So I definitely laud them for that effort they put into it, but it didn't translate well to story flow.
Yeah.
Especially comparing it to the first one.
Yeah. And I don't know. As I was watching this movie, I just started to lose interest the more we got into it. The more it started to show itself as this movie that's just trying to be plot-wise more like the first one. I just started to... And as it went along and I saw how much time was left, I was like, oh, this one's not going to give me any... I feel like this one's not going to give me a satisfying conclusion or satisfying answers. And that's at this midpoint is how I was feeling. Like, I don't know if this one... Because it's taking too much time to get to where we were in the first movie. Where it just felt like treading old ground through a slightly different lens.
Did it prompt any new questions or reopen any conversations about HAL and AI for you?
Not really, no. I think it was actually took a step back in that aspect. Like
Yeah.
I really liked that open-ended question that we were left with Hal and the last movie, where it was like, what was the programming for Hal? Like, was this like actually a, short fire, or was he actually defective, or there was a problem, or was it part of the direction all along for him to, kill them?
Yeah.
And I think the crutch, the crutch for Hal in this movie, in exploring that topic, is Dr. Chandra, and that actually ends up, instead of propping it up, weighing it down. Whereas in the first movie, it had limited screen time, but Hal spoke for himself. This movie, Dr. Chandra is advocating for Hal instead of Hal being his own character. And so that shoots down any kind of agency that Hal might have in opening that topic.
Sort of. I mean, Hal did get to make the final decision, though, and they didn't know which way he was going to lean.
True. That was significant. You're right.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but Hal basically came to what it explains is that Hal cannot lie, and so that is why he decided to dispatch. Or
he doesn't know how to lie. I guess.
He didn't know how to lie, so that's why he decided to kill the crew, so he wouldn't have to lie.
Well, no, so that's where it kind of, it's almost like, again, Blade Runner, it's the unicorn folding at the end that gives you the answer of all this great conversation, that you could have had. This first one opened up all this conversation. The second was like, oh, this is exactly what the answer was. It was because he got conflicting orders and didn't know how to lie, and so it went, it had a bug error. It's like that kind of cheapens the conversation of the whole topic, I would say.
I agree. It's still, that would be an interesting, and that's why you need to watch this movie in a vacuum for it to be interesting, because I think when taken alone, that's an interesting idea. Yeah. But as a response to 2001, it diminishes the value of that question, or it takes away that the ambiguity that we love to speculate on. Which
it's I think David brought up Lost last week when we did this, or 2001, and how everyone loves the first couple of seasons because there's so much mystery and there's all these questions, and you're wondering like, oh, what is that? And then spoilers in the last season, it's a cork in the island. Great. Cool. And it's just kind of like, well, you kind of take the wind out of people's sails in an imaginary or an imaginative way. People like to think of these questions and come up with their own answers.
Yeah, Lost shot itself in the foot even more because it
did.
It was like, you like flashbacks? Well, how about flash forwards? It's like, oh, well, now I know where they end up. Like,
so what's the point in watching the past?
Yeah, it's the ultimate tension killer.
From Hatch to hippies.
It's just I always think they think they've come upon a good idea answering the questions, and perhaps it is a good way for it to be answered, but it's ultimately more fun for people to think about it themselves.
Makes me feel like, those common complaints when someone's like wanting to vent about their day to someone else, and then another person's like, oh, well, this is how you fix that. And then the person venting gets frustrated. I think that it's almost the same way with this, where I think people think that, oh, people keep asking about this movie and like contemplating it. That means they want an answer. It's like, it's not necessarily the case. They want to talk about it and they want to be engaged. Like, it's not necessarily that they need a direct answer.
Imagine if they were to make a sequel to Inception, and literally the first scene of the second movie is that top spinning. And then you see Leonardo DiCaprio with his kids or whatever, and then the top falls over. It's like, oh, he wasn't in a dream the whole time.
Yeah,
and you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Way to really diminish the ending of the first movie.
It would be exactly that. Like, all I need to see is the top, like, wobble a little bit, and then you're good.
Which is actually genius of the movie, to have the slight little wobble.
Yeah.
And then, like, that was great.
Great work done by
On a positive note, some cast, I did like the dynamic between John Lithgow's character and Kurnow and Max.
Yeah.
That cross border, cross cultural bonding, as well as Floyd and Tanya. Those were successful, and that's what goes back to what Reese said. The cast here is really what props up this movie.
Yeah, and it's the one thing, and I don't even know like if the first movie was even intending for this or not. But it's the one thing I would say is I would value slightly more than 2001, which is like there are humans here, not people that seem like husks of humans going about day to day. Like this movie, I'm not going to say it go as far as to say it has a heart or anything, but I do get the sense that these are like, I don't know, more people that I can almost identify with more, and they
have personality. I mean, the first movie, let's be honest, 2001, the characters don't have much personality. They do a really good job of portraying the concept of AI and what you would do in that situation, but they're, like Reese said, husks.
Yeah. But yeah, that's about it, though. My problem is not with the actors. It's the fact that the pacing is just... It's not there. In this movie's efforts to be a movie versus the first movie's efforts to be a film. Just push up the nose.
Yeah.
And curl the mustache.
Yeah. I don't think this movie goes all the way enough to... It's just trying to straddle that line. And... yeah.
I think I'm honestly, up to this point, I'm still fine with this movie. I'm okay with just watching it separately from 2001. I don't mind that everything is just explained, as long as it's consistent. You know, it would be one thing if they left a lot ambiguous and then decided to just straight up answer the how question. That would feel kind of like... it was
Cheap
intentionally done to like just mess with me.
Yeah.
But I think as long as this is consistent, where they decide to, honestly, I would think it would be more interesting in book form. I would rather read this movie as a book than watch it. But I'm okay as long as that's the format throughout the rest of the film. That I'm fine not having to think of it, or I'm fine with it not causing thought-provoking questions for me, and I can just watch it as a straight-up sci-fi fantasy film, potentially about the future. I think the only thing I had a problem with was bringing Bowman into the picture.
That's literally what I was going to say. You say that, but then Bowman comes back and then throws a wrench in all of that.
Yeah, I think Bowman is just kind of throws everything out of whack for me. Where I really don't understand why he's there.
I still don't get it.
And
he like floats into the TV screen and
yeah, and I think this would operate better if all of it was just in space at this point. I did not like the jumping back to Earth to see what's going on with Bowman's mom and his wife that we've never met before, and his him just coming in to say, "Hey, I kind of remember who I was, but I just wanted to say, like, something great is about to happen."
Why are you telling me?
Yeah, that felt very off.
Yeah, something that just blew my mind. I was looking at casting. Bowman's wife, the actress, is Emily and Zooey Deschanel's mom.
Oh.
Whoa.
Did not know that. That's interesting.
I could see it now, though. Now I'm thinking about her face.
So a few sequences we haven't talked about. We didn't talk about the John Lithgow and the Russian guy making their way to the ship.
The space dildo?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's its technical name.
Yeah, this is like this movie's idea of a thrilling set piece. How do y'all feel about all that?
I think they did a really good job with it, honestly. The John Lithgow scene, as bad as it kind of looks, I think they conveyed it pretty well. And they even had them on harnesses, which I thought was really cool. So I think Lithgow was saying how they kind of like, they hooked it up to him on a leather harness, and he was even able to do like somersaults in the air and stuff like that.
Nice.
And he even got himself sick a little bit while he was doing it.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I think that they kind of went the extra mile to try to get something a little bit more realistic, weightless, John Lithgow having his weird panic attack. As weird as it is believable.
Yeah.
I would say if you're not ever having a panic attack, I don't know what's going on with you. This would be terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking the
I
same
think
thing.
the hyperventilation was
thing-
supposed to be evocative of the breathing in the silent space of the first
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
And it just
Who
overdid it.
knows how fast that thing is actually spinning, and you're like going through space without a tether to
It's the lack of
original...
tether, man. That
Yeah.
freaks me out.
Exactly. Imagine you just like your partner accidentally presses it a little too long and you go like shooting off.
I think, and this is 84. I thought the effects work was worse than in 2001.
Well,
and
it's
it
budget.
almost kind of good.
He said budget.
Yeah,
budget.
well, budget was more. This movie
Was
cost
it more?
Yeah, this
You're
movie cost
kidding.
more than the original.
Well, then never mind.
Yeah, I don't know. Just I just wasn't feeling as immersed in this space. Yeah, I just the color coding or whatever on the suit or on the suits as they're spinning around, or
It doesn't match the
it doesn't
lighting.
match the background. The lighting's all off. There's CGI, I guess.
Okay, there is
Well,
some...
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I have
I was
a
just gonna
point
say-
after you say it.
there are some things that are better. I think the fact that you actually have 3D movement in space, there is like one thing in 2001 with a model where they have it spinning, but for the most part, there's static images. Whereas in this one, you actually have a ton of different moving objects. They just aren't blended into the scene well. And I think I made a joke in 2001 that, it's if you had, or maybe it wasn't 2001. I don't know. When it comes to CGI, you could take something that doesn't even match the world, but as long as it blends in lighting, it kind of tricks your brain into believing it. This one has realistic looking stuff. They just didn't blend it well. So you're like, that looks bad.
Yeah, the blending of the compositing was a little bit lacking. And then, the silky smoothness of 2001, but also Kubrick's, we talked about him being more technically knowledgeable than the technical advisor and focusing on those technical details that do immerse you, like the whole, the spinning shots, the zero gravity with the pin floating, all those things that are, they do all these things that immerse you in the reality that make it feel like an everyday thing it brings it home to you.
Don't bring up floating pens again, man.
Well, it might have just been a glass pane, stuck with tape on it, but
well, in this movie is what I was saying. Ugh.
Oh, I don't know. Here they they didn't focus on that immersion, making it every day. And then, they focus on a lot of the set details, but then, there's no consistency on when there's zero gravity, when there is gravity. And those small things, you might not pick up on. You might pick up on if you're, crazy, about like me, like there's no gravity on that part. But that's what Kubrick was a master at, creating those small things that create the tone that make it authentic. And this didn't
Something
have
else
that.
too about Kubrick is like he knew when to linger on things because he knew that you would be in awe of what you're watching, as if you had not seen it before. And audiences had not seen something that impressive before. This one lingers, but it is something we've seen before. It doesn't do anything particularly new. So you're just resting in these environments that are, frankly, kind of mundane, because as good as this director can be at times, he just doesn't shoot the way that Kubrick did. He just doesn't have the same chops to really, I don't know, frame a scene and have it be just seem epic and monumental and awe-inspiring. That's just how I felt throughout this whole thing. It's just like a pale imitation. Any other sequences that you'd like to talk about before we move on with the story?
Well, I was going to say we can move on because I guess the one monumental scene here's coming up. So
Monumental, eh?
All right, let's finish the story there then.
all right. Floyd convinces everyone to collaborate and join both ships' hardware, while Dr. Chandra tenuously directs Hal to stay behind, risking a repeat self-preserving madness. As Jupiter implodes with a massive monolith, they manage to escape and head homeward along with a broadcasted message of peace. And I forgot to put that message in there.
It is all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. Use them together. Use them in peace.
Thank you. And
Yes.
that brings everybody happily ever after.
Yeah, so I hate how the monolith looks in this. It's a big CGI cube thing that looks terrible. The end. Bye.
So essentially, Stanley Kubrick back in the day was trying to tell us the lunar landing's fake, but there is life on Europa.
Yes, that is exactly
Where
what he was
is
trying to say.
Europa?
It's a moon of Jupiter.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of the... Yep. The whole mission is to Jupiter.
So the aliens are on a moon off Jupiter?
Yeah.
Yes.
You
Sure.
can't think of all moons like our moon.
No, the
Yeah, I know.
Stargate is on Europa or near Europa.
There are numerous moons that are very akin to Earth as far as structure goes. Maybe without the life, perhaps, but
They're not in the Goldilocks zone.
Well,
So,
so
I know they're
Europa is ice covered, so it's got water, and then we see that's what transforms into the swamp, into Dagobah, as Reese said, that has that last monolith shot.
So my question: at the end of this movie, it shows, or the end of the last movie, Bowman is the Star Child. He's already died and been reborn as the Star Child, and he's looking upon Earth like he's there. Did he just peace out back to Jupiter just to
Yeah, he's a star child. He doesn't have to tell anyone anything.
What was the
Flower
point
power,
of him? Yeah, what was the point of him being at Earth, looking upon Earth, as he's going to be the next?
No, he was there to get information. He was just studying.
I think he became a satellite that transferred
Floating through space.
that transferred his image onto the TVs.
What made him
I don't like that
ending
at all.
so? What made that ending so interesting and cool was that it was almost this kind of in my mind, it was like a positive ending where this is the next stage of
Well,
human.
some of us thought
And-
that. If you want to hear the debate about that, go
Well-
listen to our 2001 episode.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but you got the sense that, this guy's going to change Earth, go down there and change Earth. And then, okay, years later, no, he just kind of looked at it and went back to Jupiter and just waited for some other people to come there to tell them that, hey, something special is about to happen.
Hey guys, something really cool is about to happen.
What is it? Sorry, can't tell
Can't
you.
tell you. Bye.
But it just kind of again, it kind of shoots the first movie in the foot and laughs and says yeah, that was a cool ending and all, but now we're gonna postpone that, and it's gonna happen in our movie
I think-
instead.
What's that ugly baby in Witcher 3?
I forget, but I know exactly.
It
The Red Baron.
it floats around and
I don't know.
it says cryptic things.
Is that what you're equating this to?
Yeah, a little bit,
But
but,
does
but
that-
with this one, it's what?
Okay.
But this movie, they're like, hey, watch, I'm gonna turn into an old man and then back into a young man again, because what's time?
Because what's
The
time
special
anyway?
effects.
Yeah, but I don't know. The ending to this movie is so
Sudden?
confusing.
So I mean,
and
we should talk about the Hal moment.
I like kind of this not quite redemption of Hal, but a reevaluation of what that quote unquote character is, AI is, and I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. I'll sacrifice myself for this. I believe you. There's a quick moment of tension, or a small moment of tension where you don't know what way it's gonna go, and then
Yeah.
I don't
As
know.
far as everyone goes, it sounds like that a lot of people didn't like that, but that's one of the few things I did kind of like about this. I don't mind kind of tampering with, the ending of that, because that's kind of what I was imagining happened anyways. It's not like a crazy thing for me to disassociate anyway. But I like knowing that Hal kind of gets a redemption. I like knowing that he can sort of make the decision to save humanity.
Yeah, but do you know what I don't like?
Can he be redeemed if he's reduced to just a program now? Like, they worked out the bug in the code, so now he just works as he's supposed to. So now is there even a conflict?
It's a very weird scenario where Dr. Chandra talks about Hal as if Hal is like a thinking, feeling thing, but then also treats him like he's just a robot without, like, he's not sentient enough to understand consequence, you know, like it's everybody else's fault. Whereas in the first film, 2001, they kind of spark that debate where you're thinking, oh, is he actually thinking and feeling, or is he not? There's nobody to actually dictate that. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, this movie sort of just dismisses Hal is not really a big deal anymore. So in their attempt to say he is thinking and feeling, they were also kind of diminishing his character.
That's another thing, though. This movie lacks focus. Like, it doesn't know what the main, like, threat is, really, or what
is Hal
driving this movie. Is
it the Russians?
Yeah, I don't...
Is it Jupiter imploding?
So this ending just came up so suddenly for me, where they've tried to plant these moments with Bowman, and then I'm sorry, what is Roy Scheider's character?
I don't know his name.
His name is
Cornell.
Yeah, there you go. What? And was it Purnell?
I thought Cornell was John Lithgow.
Oh yeah. Oh, Floyd. I'm sorry.
Floyd. Yeah. So where was I going with this? I don't even remember where I was going with it.
Roy Scheider's character was doing something. Unimportant, probably.
Helen Mirren's character.
All the characters. Hal 9000.
The Dolphins.
The Dolphins.
Which
Thanks
we got
for
we got a really cool dolphin shot in the beginning, which I don't think we gave enough love. They probably spent some time on that shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like dolphins.
Dolphins are great.
Even though they're kind of pervs when you actually look into it.
I don't even remember a dolphin shot.
This ending was very sudden. I don't feel like there was enough build up to it. And also, what a thing to say. What a final message to give to humanity, where it's like, hey, all these planets are yours. Just don't touch Europa, you know?
Leave us alone.
Just don't go
by the
there.
Way, the biggest planet in your solar system just imploded and created a new, demi-star.
I know!
Everything's all good now.
What the hell? I was sitting here on the couch going like, that's not going to cause problems.
Yeah, not to
Also,
mention the book, it's called Lucifer, so there's that.
Also, from a CGI standpoint, this is one of the ugliest shots that I've ever seen in a movie, where you see the very basic sphere model of Jupiter, and you see the depression, and it looks very CGI, and then you see all of the monoliths, just all these little CGI cubes within it, and it just looks ugly.
It's not as bad as
Dad bods any belly button.
It's not as bad as the Mummy 2 whenever everything's being sucked back into the pyramids.
So
I know it is bad. It is worse, and I know it's of the time, but still. Go ahead.
I know some of us have said that the ending of this film is very like promising and hopeful, but I would almost argue the opposite.
Yeah, you know why? Because the third movie will rewind it again, and it'll be like, hey, we lost Discovery 2 or whatever the Russian ship is called. We got this other crew going.
I mean,
and we'll figure out. Yeah, we'll figure out Bowman decided.
No, but I think this movie feels, at least in the ending, the way it's set up, it feels very much kind of like a Genesis thing, where, you know, how God is like, hey, everything in this garden is yours. Just don't eat from that tree.
Also,
And
Lion King.
Guess what tree they eat from?
Everything the light touches is yours.
Oh yeah, they're definitely going to Europa.
They're definitely going to Europa. Like, why wouldn't they?
Don't touch this thing. What does humanity do? They touch the thing.
I don't know why that never crossed my mind, but you're totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're totally going there.
That kind of makes it more interesting. I like that. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
There's like 1,000 things in the solar system. Yeah. millions of things, and they're like, but
And humans being humans are going to be like,
I want that,
I
though."
want.
But you
wrote
also
that.
got to think about it this way from our perspective. An ancient alien civilization picked that planet. You can go anywhere else. What makes that one so special?
I don't want it. I don't want it.
You know?
No, exactly why we would go there is the thing.
We want it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think this movie is, in trying to take a step forward, it instead takes 2 steps back. And ends up just, I feel like, saying the exact same thing that the first movie did, but diluting it.
I mean, walking backwards is harder than walking forwards.
Ask Michael Jackson.
Yeah. But, you know what I mean. I just feel like this movie doesn't say anything new at all. Like, it does things slightly different than the first one. It has different elements, but in the end, I find us at the same place where we ended in the first one, where it's just, Bowman is this otherworldly being, and he's saying something is interesting, or saying something, special is going to happen. Which, he didn't. Star Child didn't say that at the end of the first one, but it was implied. Like, new things are happening, and I'm like, that's you literally just pushed the goalposts out a little further. That's what this movie did. It's like they were at the end zone, and then goalposts got pushed out. Like, that's all this feels like to me.
Yeah.
Do y'all feel any differently?
No, I pretty much agree with you, but I would like to know, I guess, would that be an issue stemming from the original work? Like this, I know it was mentioned that the book was kind of rushed or pressured to be done. Mm-hmm. So I would almost be wanting to say that a lot of that is due to the source material just not being as well thought out as previous work.
Yeah, I feel like the pitch for this movie, though, was, you want answers? Here's your answers. Guess what? They're not as good as you thought. Like,
It's also
Everyone lived happily ever after.
But you also have to think that, when they're doing their brainstorming sessions and talking about everything, they had these ideas, and everyone was like, "Oh, let's put that in there." And then this guy's got an idea. "Oh yeah, what about this?" And they're like, "Yep, let's put that in." And it just kind of, they have a bunch of. That's why you have the different kind of plot points happening here, and a mix-up, because it's just they have these good ideas, but they just can't all fit, and it's not a singular vision. It's kind of a little bit of a mishmash.
I give this movie the rating of Grandma's soup.
Grandma's soup. Well,
Tastes delicious, but then you find out it has cow testicles.
that.
Is that what your grandma fed you?
Well, I mean, hey, you want to, it tastes amazing, and you want to know how it's made, and then you learn, you're like, I wish I didn't know that.
oh.
That's fair.
But I don't think this tastes amazing. I think it tastes like, it's like oatmeal. Like, it's
Oatmeal
like,
is
I was,
actually
I was
pretty
thinking of the
good.
world,
But
like the
oatmeal is good for you.
storyline.
I was gonna say oatmeal's good for you, and it tastes pretty good.
I don't think, I'm not as negative on this movie.
Me either.
I'm actually just totally fine with the way it is. I just don't really care too much. I think if you are a huge sci-fi nerd and you just love collecting sci-fi films, like, this would probably just be in your collection, is one of those things you put on the TV every now and then.
Yeah. And actually, compared to a lot of other campy sci-fi things
exactly.
are done really well in this movie.
Like I said, this
Anchored by the
separated from
first movie.
2001, I think, is an actually good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just the ideas presented in 2001 are so fascinating.
Yeah.
That the fact that this one has the gall to, like,
Follow it up.
try to answer those, or push the timeline further back and, like, kind of take ownership of what 2001 was trying to do.
The gall or the balls?
How dare they?
It's just, it really is a movie that, one of the few where I actually do have to, be a little harsher on it, because it decided to follow up something like 2001, and its ideas about how to follow it up were so kind of, they weren't bad, but they were just unsatisfying.
Keep your perspective right now in mind, and now divert it towards Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
No, this is different.
No, it's
Because-
not.
No, that's a prequel.
So
It is.
No,
but-
I have a better. I think I have a better comparison.
Well, the reason I want to use Lord of the Rings and Hobbit is because we have kind of a fondness for Hobbit.
I think it was more about. I think the reason it doesn't work is because it's not trying to answer questions that were prompted. In
It's
Lord of the
not,
Rings.
but it's using a masterpiece as its kind of backdrop.
No, I think a much better comparison for me. It has to be a sequel.
Can
it
I
has to
name
be,
one?
Go ahead.
Doctor Sleep and The Shining.
Yes, exactly.
And I think
another Kubrick
And
one.
the thing is, Doctor Sleep is on its own pretty good.
It
And
is.
then you know what the worst part to me was? The ending, where
it
they
tried
go
to be The
back to the
Shining.
hotel and
Yeah.
it tried to be The Shining and answer questions, showing the ghosts, and you're like, no.
yeah,
that's
when
true.
you have such an iconic classic that's been, aged like a fine wine, as I said for the second time, for a long time, you can't just try to be a direct sequel to it that apes the same style. You have to do something different in most cases, unless you're Blade Runner, and Denis Villeneuve is a
A god.
masterclass and made Blade Runner 2049 and it worked. But other than that, no, it's just something you shouldn't even try to do unless you have something truly interesting to say and impart that is different, but also accents the first movie.
But you have to look at like I said with Hobbit, the reason I
Back
say
to Hobbit.
yes, but the reason I say Hobbit is because there are some clear issues with it, and we still love it.
I
Right?
don't love it. I do like them.
Yeah. Well, I
think
love the
in
first
this
one.
context, you don't necessarily have to come forward with something new, interesting to say. And I think they're successful in saying, okay, let's flesh out the details of, let's provide the outer cookies of the Oreo to the cream filling that was 2001. So you kind of give this some kind of boundaries and encapsulation details of the story. And honestly, if you married these two movies together and took out, the psychedelic abstract Stargate trip of the second movie and put in some more details of the story, more character interaction from here, honestly, I think you'd have a perfect movie if you had these two movies combined.
I will say this: I would love Roy Scheider in the first movie.
Yes.
Give me that. That'd be very cool.
Scheider, I hardly know her.
Wow.
Roy Scheider
Rob
is...
Schneider?
Yeah, give me Rob Schneider from The
It was a
Animal
stapler.
and
And Waterboy.
Water. No, that's Adam Sandler.
Yeah, and Rob
Oh yeah,
Schneider.
I guess he's in that. Yeah.
can do it.
All night long.
All right. Anyway, I feel like we're reviewing the movie already, so we should probably just close this story portion out. So we're going to take a quick break, and on the other end, we will get into our brief reviews with numbered scores, talk about what critics thought, get into some box office, and then talk a little bit of franchise talk. Talk. I've said talk 500 times. But yeah, we'll see y'all then. Welcome back. Let's talk 2010, the year we make contact. David, you got our scores there in a little bowl. You want to pull them at random?
I sure do, boss.
What?
All right.
For one, I am not boss, and two, what was that voice?
You got a bit
That's
of that
okay,
darker
boss. Just let it
mustache.
happen.
That was my Pinky voice from Pinky and the Brain. What are we going to do today, Brain? The same thing we do every day, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Or Jupiter.
Love it.
All right, let's go to our first up. Me, David, with a 7.
Oh, what does that remind me of?
I don't know.
Tomb of the Dragon
Oh,
Emperor.
there it is.
7. That's
Good
got a ring
company.
to it. So yeah, David notoriously gave The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor a 7 out of 10 on one of our Lost episodes that you can find on screenpunk.net if you really dig for it. And there's an excerpt on the podcast feed where you can listen to just his review of The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Just scroll down in the feed and you'll find it.
Reese, it feels like you had a scripted part for that. We should just take this, and then anytime I give something a 7, just go ahead and incorporate that there. I actually thought about comparing this to Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in my brain. I was like, okay, which one would I rather
Every
watch?
shot is
Yeti-
beautiful. You can use it.
Yeti football or floating baby?
Man, I can't believe it's been over 2 years.
Amazing CGI.
So, this movie did a lot right, I think. I think that the fact that they didn't try to be Kubrick, they got really good actors. I think Roy Scheider is a hell of a frontman for this movie. I think he drives the whole thing. I think there is some shoddy direction at times, but there's still a lot of care in a lot of areas. And as slow as it is, and honestly, part of this might be because I was told how bad it was. I think I was the last one here to watch it. I wasn't like put off by it. I thought that I wasn't bored. I wouldn't watch it again, but I wasn't bored.
Wouldn't watch it again. 7 out of 10.
Wait, that's the opposite of
10 out of 10.
Yeah,
that's the opposite of Tomb, though. You said that was really rewatchable.
super rewatchable. I wonder how many times I've seen it.
How many times have you seen it?
At least I watch it at least once a year on my birthday.
That's your thing, guys. Birthday party at my place. We're watching Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
I would leave.
Or maybe it's a Christmas movie because of the snow. So like one day you have kids.
Become a Christmas movie.
And you're all right, guys, come on down. Time for Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
The real question is, who would win in a fist fight? Roy Scheider or Brendan Fraser?
Brendan Fraser all the way.
Or an ape with a football.
All right. So I think that in the end, this movie did what it came out to do. I don't think they were trying to be Kubrick. And I enjoyed it. I just think that they could have probably tweaked a couple things and maybe included a little more action. I don't know. 7 out of 10.
I don't know.
Fair enough.
Next up, Noah with a 6.
Yeah, I've kind of done a review already, but I didn't hate this movie. It kind of fails on many of its reveals or mysteries that the other one left, and that's kind of where I dock some points for it, mostly on that, because I think it's relatively well put together for what it is, and if you view it through a different lens other than it being a sequel to 2001, I think it actually holds up, and that's why I give it a 6. But I was just kind of disappointed with the reveals, as far as, or not reveals, but HAL 9000 redemption arc. I forgot his name, but Space Baby.
David Bowman.
David Bowman showing up was a little weird, and but I think they did have some neat ideas, that said, and it reflects throughout the movie, and I think they tried, and that deserves some credit.
All right, and next up, take it back now, y'all. We have Reese with a 5.5.
2 steps this time.
Crisscross.
Still 5.5.
Reese just ran over a pothole.
Yeah, I can't view this movie in a vacuum. You know why? Because it is constantly reminding you that it is a sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey. That's my problem with this movie. I feel like if it had done a completely different thing than 2001 and only had like tangential connections to that movie, I'd be singing a different tune right now. But it is almost scared to be its own thing because it's like, hey, remember Hal? Let's bring him back. And I don't care how much this was in the story of Arthur C. Clarke. Maybe that, like, I blame him too for this not being as good, if that is the case. I haven't read the book. It's just, this movie can't completely do its own thing because it knows that it is living in the shadow of 2001, and it just can't quite keep up at every turn. I also think it is a rehash of the same ideas that were in the first one, but they're diluted here. I think this movie ends in the same place that the first one does, but it's a lot less interesting because it's answered a lot of the questions. And part of the fun of 2001. Fun's a weird word to describe a Kubrick movie, but part of the
Intrigue.
the intrigue of that movie was just, as we've said, the word that, like, I feel like we've said 500 times already, is ambiguity. Like, I like that about this movie. It keeps the mystery fascinating, and it keeps you questioning, you know, what everything is all about. This movie doesn't do that. It's like it puts a period at the end of the sentence instead of a question mark. And to me, its answers to those questions are not that interesting to me. I didn't need a resolution to what Hal was, or like, I didn't need that described to me. That said, it's still a decently made movie. The production quality is pretty good. I don't like the introduction of the digital, like, CGI effects and all that. I think it looks worse. But it still has merit to it, and I do like the actors involved. If there's one thing I would want to pluck out of this movie and insert into 2001, it's perhaps Roy Scheider as the lead in this movie. Put him in 2001, and who knows, that might even improve that movie. I don't know. So that, I'm not saying the movie is bad. It's just, it just seems so kind of unnecessary, because I don't think it says anything new. It doesn't bring anything new to the table. And it also tries to juggle too many balls, like with this whole Russian-American conflict. While that is interesting, it's underbaked. And yeah, it's just, yeah.
It does have us asking the question, what would we do if we had two sons?
Yeah, it's just, this movie is the ultimate kind of shrug to me. It's like, it's neither here nor there. I understand why it was swept under the rug. It's not really a rejection of the movie. It's more of like, that doesn't need to be here. I'm going to, you know, put that somewhere else and forget that it exists. So I agree. I understand why this movie was kind of forgotten over the years, because it doesn't do anything monumental or monolithic.
We are not a monolith.
Yeah. So I am perfectly content with giving this a 5.5. I think that is what it deserves. Moving along. We have AJ with a 7.
Yeah, so interestingly, I started off this movie kind of like David. You go in this with poor expectations. And it was a slog watching it kind of the first time, but watching it a second time was actually a pretty big improvement. And I was able to see it as its own thing. And there's this interesting, I don't know, what's the word? Paradox, maybe. I think instead of viewing this as, or trying to divorce this from 2001 to try to fix its problems, I think maybe an interesting approach would be to push it closer to 2001. And like I kind of said, you know, make it into an Oreo where meld the structure of this movie, the detail of this movie, the answers of this movie with the impression, the tone of the first movie. I think you would have an awesome recipe there. And as was mentioned earlier, 2001 was almost an anthology in terms of, you know, story clips together. And if we almost, instead of a separate entity here with 2010, make it an epilogue or just kind of the wrap up of the anthology of that overall story, I think that actually works quite a bit better. And comparing this movie not only to its predecessor but to its peers in the sci-fi genre, there's a lot going right here. I mean, you have pretty good character chemistry, not a whole lot of character depth, I'll admit that. But there's a lot that is technical as far as, you know, building sets and stuff that is immersive enough for me, intriguing enough for me, and has a bit enough tension. It does fall short, and, you know, whether or not it works as I kind of just described, you know, smashing it at the back end of 2001 instead of separating it. The intention, I guess, was its own sequel, was to do its own thing, and there it wasn't successful. So I'm going to draw back a bit to 6.5, but I'm actually, I don't want to say proud, but I'm happy that this movie does exist, albeit not necessary, to really complete the movie that was 2001, but just kind of an addendum, an appendix. That's really what this movie is most appropriate as, an appendix to 2001, not necessarily a full sequel. Really, that's the best way I can put it. And I think in that sense, it's successful. And just, the fact of, it was kind of joked about, having the cojones the gall to follow up Kubrick. I mean, that is a thing. I don't know. I didn't really agree with it more, but now that it's sunk in, like, this director, didn't, following up Kubrick, but Kubrick told him to make your own movie, and he did. And there is enough sci-fi element in here that is positive. The cast is great. Definitely a lot to be improved on, which we've spoken about, but I think this movie has its own merit if you can, watch it on its own and also in the overall sense of being an appendix to the 2001 story. So yeah, 6.5. I think I'm happy with that.
Awesome.
All right, I guess we have one more. Last but not least, Irina with a 6.
Yeah, I'm not offended by this movie at all. I don't think it ever bothered me that it was trying to answer questions from 2001, just because any one of Kubrick's works, I automatically just see as his own individual art piece. And I think it would be unfair to say that nobody else could be given a shot to try and showcase the story concept that is this Space Odyssey. Like, I think it should be open for other directors to try and interpret or, create a story off of. So I'm not mad about it. And I think they actually did a decent job with what they had and the position that they're in here. So I like a lot of the characters. I think that what is mostly lacking for me in this movie is focus. Where they do have good concepts and they do have a good structure, they kind of just pull a thread and then just drop it. I found myself a lot of the time not getting that interested in a certain development because they would almost immediately just sever the tension, with some kind of rapport between Floyd and Helen Mirren. What was the character's name?
Tanya.
Like that. Yeah, there you go.
Pick a Russian female name. You're probably going to get it. Tanya.
Yeah. Tanya. So there would be tension between these groups, but then almost immediately remedied with a simple conversation, which is fine, but I found myself not really getting that invested in any of these characters after a while because I knew it wouldn't really matter anyway. At some point in the movie, I just felt like those developments weren't really going to be met with like a huge payoff anywhere. So I enjoyed watching it. I did kind of like zone out every now and then because of that, but everyone's kind of mentioned all of our points, but it's kind of interesting to me that we all sort of gave a score that's kind of similar, but for very different reasons. Yeah. So we all enjoyed or didn't enjoy this in very different ways. So
only a 1.5 difference between the lowest and highest score.
Yeah. So I think I'm just gonna leave it at that with a 6.
Yeah, I think one of us predicted earlier it'd be between 5 and 7.
Oh, was that you?
That was me, actually.
Sure.
I'm just mad no one picked up on my gallbladder appendix joke. Is unnecessary.
It was me, guys.
Let the record show.
I liked that joke, AJ. It was a good joke.
Average?
All right. Yeah, give us that average.
All
Crunch those numbers.
Title average for our group is a 6.2 for 2010, the year we make contact. And if you're curious, if you want to say that this is a franchise of 2001 and 2010, we have a franchise average of 7.7. So this one weighing down its predecessor quite a bit.
But not as much as it could have. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Like, I think the fact that this movie has the score that it does is still kind of a testament to it, despite our kind of ambivalence or, just how we feel about it.
Yeah.
The fact that it's not a disaster is kind of astonishing. So I'll say that in its favor.
You could say
That means there was effort.
we've done in our social consciousness, we've done an appendectomy, as it were, for this movie.
Yes.
I'll leave that alone. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to critics. Oh, I do want to know what's above and below this one in terms of rankings.
We have it here. So 2010, the year we make contact, is tied at a 6.2 with The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and Dragonheart. And then you have above it a few at 6.3. I will throw out The Never-Ending Story, as well as Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, and let's say another older one, Clash of the Titans, 1981. And in the same series of sci-fi, we have Dune, which had a 6.3.
Oh, wow.
And that would be, I can't even remember, director.
Yeah, the David Lynch
David
version.
Lynch, thank you. David Lynch's Dune, obviously.
Yep.
And below, we have, I guess, another alien movie, Cowboys and Aliens at a 6.0, and another Pirates movie, On Stranger Tides at 6.0.
All right. Not bad company. I mean, it makes sense. I'll just say that. All right, critics. On Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a 66% from critics, so it's in the fresh, guys, surprisingly, and a 61% from audiences. So we were kind of right in line there, too. On Metacritic, it has a 53, and from audiences, a 7.3, which would average in the 6-point-something range. So, again, right there in that range. IMDb, it has a 6.8. So everyone is feeling pretty, mixed to, hey, not so bad. Who'd have thunk it?
Not great, not bad.
Yeah, kind of on the more positive end of mixed, I'll say that. So, leaning slightly positive, which, again, is kind of impressive considering, no movie has the right to be good against 2001 A Space Odyssey, as a sequel to 2001 A Space Odyssey. So, hey, a very light pat on the back to you, 2010, the year we make contact. Moving on to box office. This movie is budgeted at $28 million, which adjusted for inflation today would be a $75 million movie. The movie released wide on December 7th in 1984. Also playing at the time was Beverly Hills Cop, City Heat, The Terminator, and Missing in Action.
Ooh.
So you're saying inflation has gone up triple? Man.
It's compounding.
Yeah. What are y'all's predictions here for 2010 box office worldwide? Let's start with Noah.
Okay. Let me think. So 75 million budget.
That's in today's dollars.
Yeah. And we're
we'll do inflated. Yep.
Yeah. So I think it did decently, which makes me think 200 million.
200 million?
Yeah.
All right. Irina?
180.
David?
I mean, I think this movie didn't get a sequel, so I'm going to say it didn't make triple. I don't think that the fact that it got swept under the rug, I don't think it did amazing. I thought I was going to be on the high end and say 150. But, I'll keep it at 150.
All right. AJ?
David stole mine. Let's say, so Terminator in the mix there, as well as Beverly Hills Cop. That's some tough competition.
And City Heat apparently was actually pretty good at the time.
Yeah, I'll continue the trend downwards. 140.
140. And it's AJ with the win.
I thought about lowering my score,
Darn.
too.
So the movie without inflation was at 40.4 million.
Oh,
with inflation,
gosh.
it hit 108 million.
That's not great.
A massive downturn when you consider that adjusting for inflation and including re-releases, 2001 was like over the billion mark, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is pretty much like a bomb. Like I mean, back then there wasn't as much marketing costs, so it's not like a huge bomb or anything, but the fact that it cost adjusted 75 million and made adjusted 108 million is not a good sign. So not a lot of interest in returning to this quote unquote franchise. I just don't think a lot of people saw this as something that needed a sequel or needed a follow-up. And when you don't have Kubrick on board and you have some other director who's not known to make absolute stone cold classics, you're going to kind of not get as much interest. And it's also kind of a stodgy, I don't know, not super exciting sci-fi, and it's up against, as AJ mentioned, Beverly Hills Cop and The Terminator. What are people going to go see? You know,
Terminator.
It's exactly.
I didn't know it released alongside Terminator. I should have been listening.
Yeah. So yeah, not a big success at the box office, and yeah, it's not really garnered much of a following. Though I do think there's a bit of a cult following for this one. It's not what you would imagine, not what you'd picture today as like, oh, that movie has a big cult following. But there's people out there that do defend this movie and still watch it to this day. And it has a Blu-ray release, so that says something about it. Like, it must have been enough to justify continuing on in physical releases to keep up current with the times.
Did you buy the Blu-ray?
I did buy the Blu-ray.
Of course
for
you did.
$5 on Amazon. I mentioned that earlier. You weren't listening.
Sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, there is no third movie, and let's do a little franchise talk here. So there are more books than just the first two.
Oh.
We also have 2061 Odyssey 3, also by Arthur C. Clarke, and we have 3001 The Final Odyssey, also by Arthur C. Clarke. So there's two more books in this series. Was there any...
I heard somewhere that one's actually pretty good.
Maybe.
The last one.
But yeah, does that mean there was any talk about actual film or TV sequels to this? There actually was.
Oh.
Yes. So in 2000, MGM and Tom Hanks were in discussions regarding turning both 2061 and 3001 into films. That, of course, kind of died out. That was way back in 2000. Didn't happen. That said, though, Tom Hanks spearheading some sort of, I don't know, 2001 sequel with these two. That sounds interesting to me. I'd love to see what that would be. Like, if with Tom Hanks behind that, I feel like I could trust his decision making.
Tom Hanks stranded in space.
That's
with
literally what I was thinking.
Yeah, there you go. Wilson, David Bowman.
The pet asteroid.
He talking to Hal. No, he'd have Hal. He'd have his discussions with Hal. But apart from that, we also have a 2014. In 2014, the Sci-Fi Channel ordered a miniseries on 3001. That's the fourth book, and both the Kubrick and Clarke estates were actually fully on board with, making this thing happen. But again, that's kind of stagnated, and we haven't heard any word from that since. But it was surprising in my research to discover that there was actually plans to continue this, and that there were more books. I didn't know that going into this. So it's something that, honestly, in the future, I could see someone maybe picking this back up and making something in line with maybe the Blade Runner 2049, as I said. Something that just... If you had a tour, I can't say words tonight.
Denis Villeneuve could do this.
Yes, Denis Villeneuve could do this because he does all sci-fi perfectly. But yeah, I could see this. I could see someone picking this up and doing something interesting, being this far removed from the original two. Like, I might be on board to watch that, and I don't actually think this it sounds weird calling it a franchise, but I don't think it's dead. I think we will see something else in this at some point. But it also doesn't have, I don't think it's an imminent thing. It's going to be something that's going to be like way down the road. But if you had to ask me, I think in 50 years, we will see someone come back to this world. But that's just my thought. Yeah, Dave Bowman.
Still floating around, baby.
Would y'all watch a sequel to this movie?
I think if I read all the books,
Probably.
I would.
Yeah.
I think I would want to read the books first at this point.
I'd prefer to read the books and then compare.
Yeah.
Okay. AJ?
Yeah, same thing. I would lean through the books to kind of lead me, I guess.
All right. Yeah, I would be interested because I think they can't rehash the same thing again. I do want to know what happens in these book sequels, where they would push this. But, I'd be intrigued to see where they'd take this. All right. With that said, next week,
do we want to
we're
revive?
talking about...
We've been sleeping on it a little while. Dishonorable or honorable?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, let's dust that old thing off. So before we close this episode out, we do a little thing called honorable or dishonorable, where we talk about the franchise and discuss whether or not it ended on a satisfying note or not. Does this final movie in the franchise demand a sequel, or does it close the book effectively? How do y'all feel about 2010, the year we make contact? Does this end on a satisfying note, and are we able to satisfyingly close the book on this franchise?
Well, it's kind of ambiguous.
I think satisfying being the word, we should probably take that out. It ends appropriately without asking more questions.
All right, I've got clear thoughts on this. The opening of the new sun and the last monolith on Europa and transforming that obviously leads into another story that is not really, it doesn't jive with saying, everybody's happy, peace, everything.
The world is at peace now.
So that kind of conflicting message at the end just is kind of dishonorable.
Yeah.
For me.
I think it's honorable enough. I'm like, okay, there we go. I rehashed the first one for me.
It's a complete story in your mind.
I don't know. Now I'm kind of maybe I'm on the fence with this one.
I've been on the fence about it because I just don't. Partly because I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about the ending.
Yeah, I think I'm 50-50. So, Arena, you're 50-50 too?
Yeah.
So far, AJ's tipping the balance towards Dishonored. Anyone out there think it's more of an honorable death?
I would say it's more dishonorable just because even though it answers a lot of questions, it also leaves more questions than it answers too.
But does it do it in a way where it's like that was the intention, or does it do it in a way where it's like unsatisfying that it doesn't answer those questions? Because like for me, 2001, I would call that an honorable death, even though it's just one movie, even though it is ambiguous.
Well, yes, because that's its goal.
Yeah.
But this one was like willy-nilly with the question answering, and then it was like, oh, by the way, here you go.
Well, I thought they did a good job of trying to make it final, but as AJ said, they kind of threw in a couple little things where you're like, I know they didn't intend on it asking more questions, but it makes me want to ask more questions. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where that makes me want to land. I don't know. It's more in the middle.
Well, either way, it's going to be dishonorable because we have two on that side. But
I'm not upset about it.
You're on the fence, though?
I'm on the fence.
So we got 3 on the fence and 2 dishonorable. So that is going to automatically classify this movie as a dishonorable death for the 2001-2010 franchise. All right. Thus ends the episode. Next week, we'll be talking about Gattaca.
Gattaca.
Is that how people say it?
Get.
Ugh, gross. Get that out of here. that out of here.
Gattaca.
Yeah, excited to talk about this movie. It was kind of a late addition to the miniseries, but totally appropriate. It's a movie I haven't seen since early 2000s. Hey, that's spoilers for our next episode.
Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, definitely excited to watch it. Gattaca, next week. We'll see y'all.
Bye.
You have been drinking your whiskey from Kentucky.